Hello, everyone. On behalf of CyberMinder, I welcome you all to today's webinar on AI-driven innovations for accurate risk evaluation of DevSecOps vulnerabilities. A quick introduction to CyberMinder. CyberMinder is a fully automated continuous threat exposure management platform that protects internet-facing assets. By simulating 16,000 plus real world attack techniques, it identifies vulnerabilities, validates exposures, discovers attack paths, prioritizes risk, and automates remediation, ensuring accurate protection with zero false positive. Moving on to today's session, we are thrilled to have Sumanth Naropanth, Black Hat trainer, founder, and CEO, Gauntlet Technologies. He regularly speaks and teach at security conferences globally, including Black Hat, USA, Europe, Asia, and Middle East, AppSec USA, NASCOM, etc. Along with him, we have Maithri Nadig, Principal Architect, Gauntlet Technologies. Maithri regularly speaks at security events. In the recent years, she has presented her work at the Security Fest, Wicked 6, Cloud Security Alliance Annual Summit, and various other conferences. If you have any questions for the speaker, please write them in the Q&A box and we will address those at the end of the session. Now I will hand over the session to the speaker. Over to you, Sumanth. Sumanth, you're on mute.
Great. So thank you for that, Nazia. And thanks to CyberMinder to having us here today for this webinar. It is our pleasure to talk about what we've been doing, what we've been working on at Gauntlet, specifically about AI-driven innovations for risk evaluation, risk reduction when it comes to DevSecOps practices. Before we get started, we'll quickly go over the topics that we have planned for today. Since the fundamental topic here is about DevSecOps or security for DevOps, this is also something that we work on at Gauntlet. So the fundamental premise behind what we do at Gauntlet is essentially all things related to build, development, deployment, as well as some of the code level security practices, security shortcomings that we address through Gauntlet. But broadly speaking, since this is a technical webinar, we're going to be focusing more on the problem statement. What are the challenges associated with some of the DevOps practices? Obviously, it's a very large umbrella, so we're not going to be able to cover everything. But we'll talk about the key pain points that many of the companies, many of whom may be in the audience today, that face these kinds of challenges. And that will segue to what the main topic today is, which is about using AI to solve some of these problems associated with tools, frameworks that exist for DevSecOps. And then we are talking about how do we use AI? I mean, we'll give a brief intro about Gen and agentic AI. Then we talk about how we can use AI to solve some of these tool-based limitations. And finally, we'll open it up for Q&A. So we've kept adequate time towards the end. So hopefully we'll have an engaging discussion with all of you. Nazia already touched upon who we are, why we are here. So as she mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of Gauntlet. I also run another company called Deep Armor. I have worked at Sun, Palm, Intel, and many other small companies in the past. With me, I also have Maithri, who has been instrumental in not only founding the company, but also writing the very early code for our product and eventually working on the product architecture, QA, etc. Right. So let's talk about what is involved in DevOps. Right. So DevOps can mean many different things to many different people. The reason why we have started working on DevSecOps at Gauntlet, well, we started more than a year ago, is that we had many customers coming to us and facing challenges when it comes to application security, data security, infrastructure, as well as code level security problems in their environment. So now this is handled in many different ways, depending on the size of company that you are, the kind of people that you have, the budgets that you have, for instance. But very often, automation is seen as a silver bullet when it comes to handling security for DevOps. So, but then again, it talks about, we need to talk about what does it mean to use automation? What does it mean to use tools? And which part of DevOps do we really use tools for? So if you look at some of the building blocks or some of what constitutes DevOps, these are the things that come to mind. And this is from a public source. So there are certain practices in the build environment where you have developers working in conjunction with architects, release managers, testing teams, etc. There are hooks essentially to make sure that there is static application security review, dynamic application security review, container analysis, and so on, that helps the release manager or the project manager make sure that all the checks, the security checks, are ticked before a particular product goes to release. So naturally, when you're talking about SAST and so on, I don't know how many of you are familiar with these terminologies, but code level vulnerabilities introduced by developers during development is a big source of security problems. Sometimes inadequate design, inadequate architecture reviews, or inadequate threat modeling can also lead to security problems. So having the right kind of hooks in place to make sure that a particular build does not go to production. So all of that planning as well as the build level pre-production activities, so those come in on one side. Of course, testing is another part to it. So when you are planning the release of a product, you want to make sure that not only the developers have completed their job, but also the QA team. So they run through DAST, they run through negative testing, they run through functional testing, and so on. So all of that should be completed. From a security point of view, it's usually DAST and security testing. So that is also a part of the pre-production security environment or security practices. And once it goes to production, you want to make sure that the deployment is secure and there are adequate measures and guardrails deployed in order to ensure that there are lesser chances of a vulnerability creeping in. So what this means is product penetration testing, configuration testing, checking for all kinds of misconfigurations that can happen, let's say in the deployment environment. The customers may be using cloud, they may be using on-prem data centers, etc. So once you deploy, there is also the reactive security measures. So collection of logs using certain tools for application security. So for instance, WAF, web application firewalls, and so on, as well as continuous monitoring for security incidents, etc. So some of these activities, this is just a high-level overview, but some of these activities are specific to where you deploy, for instance, cloud. On the other hand, some of these activities are specific to the development environment, the developers, the QA folks, etc. So some of the pre-production environment. So naturally, when you are tasked to do DevSecOps, all of these comes into picture. So which means that you not only have to take care of introducing or actually like finding the right kind of tooling for your code level security, but also for your deployment, infrastructure, security practices. And also we didn't touch upon things like supply chain, so software supply chain security and so on. So that's the reason why this is a big challenge, not only for small and mid-sized companies, but even for large enterprises. So this can be a high volume game. So where you have a lot of moving parts, a lot of activity, multiple repositories, multiple cloud accounts, and multiple cloud service providers as well, because we're seeing a lot of companies use a multi-cloud environment. So naturally, this is an area where it's a good business model, and also this is an area where there are a lot of problems still waiting to be solved. So the world essentially gravitated towards developing tools, developing SaaS solutions, developing capabilities to automate. After that, customers like all of you started spending money on buying those tools. So this is a multi-billion-dollar market for all of these, in fact, for each of these 6 blocks that you see here. But then we started seeing that these problems still don't go away. Right? You're spending like several hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars sometimes, but then you are flooded with a large volume of alerts. You're flooded with false positives. So it becomes really tricky for you to understand how to prioritize, what to fix, when to fix. And actually, this has escalated quite significantly over the past few years. So if you look at IBM and the Ponemon Institute, every year they publish cost of a security breach. And consistently, cloud is one of the top 3 problems that you see in this space. So while DevOps can mean many things, we'll focus on 3 main things for this presentation. Naturally, there's not enough time to cover everything. but we'll focus on three main things. One is cloud infrastructure security, so which is part of DevOps in most companies. And there are definitely certain problems that need to be addressed. So one of the main concerns here in this space is that we very often talk to companies that use cloud. And for the sake of cloud argument, I'm going to be talking about AWS, GCP, and Azure. These are the three popular platforms. So there is a common misunderstanding or a misconception that just because you go with a big brand name, you're automatically protected or security is assured to you. And unfortunately, that's not the case. Right? So we very regularly see headlines such as these. So where there are exposed S3 buckets, private services being exposed to the public internet, companies struggling to understand the security nuances of cloud-based services. And if you see the third bullet over there, that's actually pretty interesting because Microsoft, the promoter of Azure Cloud, themselves could not have adequate security to protect their data. So because of an insecure blob storage, they leaked 38 terabytes of data just a couple of years ago. And we have seen this among our own customers. So one of our customers actually recently had their intellectual property stolen because of a publicly exposed AWS EC2 volume. So as I mentioned earlier, I'll talk about the problem. I'll also talk about the solution, the existing status quo solution. And then we talk about why that is not enough. Right. So naturally, this problem statement is not new. Cloud has been around for almost 2 decades now. So some of the cloud service providers started providing solutions. So AWS Security Hub, Guard Duty, AWS Config, and likewise on GCP, there is the Command Center and Azure Defender for Cloud. So while these are good, these are still not one size fits all sort of a solution. So very often we have seen companies struggling to use Security Hub or a Command Center or Defender, finding it really difficult to deploy and maintain. So they need to hire experts to run these tools. And even after they do that, these are not the main offering from the cloud service providers. So these are additional capabilities that they give. So not only are they sometimes inadequate, they can also be dangerous because they give a false sense of security. So there have been instances where these platforms or these solutions have not alerted the customers to the right kind of security vulnerabilities or weaknesses. So the point that we are making here is while these may be adequate to a certain extent, these certainly have a lot of gaps. So if you're a customer of AWS Security Hub or any of the native solutions, you should be aware of what you're getting and what you're not getting. Right? The second area that we are going to be focusing on is secrets and credential scanning. And while this might be a point of debate among certain circles, we are seeing that there are very often incidents where hard-coded API keys, passwords, and any kind of sensitive information being leaked through the front-end source code, through the back-end source code, or code that is accessible to contractors and third parties and so on. And this is a persistent problem, and this is a serious problem because quite often what it means is that this can lead to data, being stolen by exfiltrators very easily. Therefore, the severity of a data leak when keys are being breached is really high. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a customer come to us, a potential customer come to us and say that someone pulled out their entire database and held them to ransom, all because their database backup secret, the token was exposed through their front-end code. Again, this is an area where there has been a lot of research and there are solutions. If you're using GitHub, GitLab, Bitbucket, any of these standard code management repository management tools, they also give you some solutions. For instance, GitHub gives you GitHub Advanced or GitLeaks. There's also Trufflehog and so on. But we have done some extensive research on these topics. So if you look at the screenshot on the left-hand side, you see that there is a certain string. So if you see it's wow 707045 and so on, the same string is in two places in the script. So one is called as DB underscore password in the key value pair. The other one has the key DB underscore password in a concise form. So Git leaks actually flags the second one as an exposed secret, but not the first one. Now just imagine if you're having dozens of repositories, how many such API keys, Stripe access keys, Slack tokens, secret keys are still lying undetected by your Git leaks or GitHub Advanced. The second example is on the top right, where these tools have identified a specific access key as being leaked. But right below that is an AWS secret access key or a secret key that is not being flagged. So while on the one hand, it's good that it's showing an access key as being leaked, you have no idea whether this is an expired key, whether this is a valid key, what are the permissions associated with it. Should you drop everything and go run and fix it right now? Or is this something that is a false positive? So I'll give you an example. So let's say on the one hand, you have an AWS key that is being leaked from your front end. Let's say it's a valid key and it gives access to objects, certain images that are already public. On the other hand, there is another key that is being leaked. That's an admin key. And access to that admin key basically allows an attacker to shut down the entire AWS account. So you need to think which one is a priority. So going back to my earlier terminology, which is a scenario where you have to drop everything and go fix it right now versus which one can actually wait or is a false positive. So none of these tools, which supposedly solve these DevOps problems, actually give you that kind of contextual information. The third area of problem is software supply chain, and this is becoming an increasingly big pain point for most companies worldwide, including in India. So about 5 years ago, the White House in the US issued a mandate that all companies in the US should actively track their software bill of materials or SBOM. And in fact, India as well stepped up recently. So as part of the certain framework, cybersecurity framework, now it's important for all Indian companies, especially in the critical sector, financial services and so on, to have an expanded bomb scanning framework. So we'll touch upon what that is shortly. So which means that you have to have an idea of where your code, your third-party packages, whether it's free, open source, or commercial, you should keep tabs on what's happening there. What are the vulnerabilities? Again, there are plenty of solutions out there in the market. So we talk about Cyclone DX, there's Dependabot, there's Trivy, and so on. So these are useful, right? So going back to the argument, there is some of these tools have the capability that they can actually build the bomb for you. But then their usefulness is limited. There is a ceiling to which they can actually help you. So for instance, it may say that you have 20 repositories, your total bomb size is about 2000 line items. Out of those 2000 packages, 965 are vulnerable. I'm using the example on the screen. But then do you have the visibility of how many of those 900 something packages are actively being used in your environment? How many of them are actually exploitable? Let's say there is a log4j tomorrow. You might be shipping log4j as part of your package, but you may not be using any of the log4j libraries or functions in your code. So in which case, should you actually update log4j right away? Or can it wait? Or can you deprecate it? So these are some of the questions that it's very difficult to get answers for. And also understanding what's actually critical and what is not. So out of those 2000 plus packages in your BOM, it's possible that just a handful of them are actually critical and exploitable. So you not only need what's called as the CVSS score, which is the severity score for a vulnerability, you also need some exploitability information. You also need to know whether there are actual known exploits out there in the public. So very often when we talk to large enterprises, there is an alert fatigue. So that is being caused by excessive false positives. Companies have no idea where to start. They don't know whether these functions are being used, whether they should cherry pick patches, they should update. I mean, I'm just touching the tip of the iceberg here. There are also problems associated with development, dependencies, things breaking, API compatibility, and so on. So this is becoming an increasingly hard problem to solve. So now that we covered two main areas. So one is what are some of the biggest problems in DevSecOps and what kind of solutions out there exist for solving these problems through tools. We look at how these gaps can be addressed, or it's possible to address some of these gaps using AI. And for this, I'm going to be handing it over to Maithri. So she'll be walking us through some of these AI capabilities and what we can potentially do to make things better and improve the status quo. Right. So over to you, Maithri.
Yeah, thank you, Sumanth. So let's focus. Before I tell you how we can use AI, I just wanted to touch upon what is AI and what does it mean by Gen AI, traditional AI, agentic AI. So we all have been using AI for quite a bit of time now, and it is nothing new. But there's a difference between the types of AI that has been used, and there are multiple ways you can use AI for driving innovation um, at your software companies. So basically, your traditional AI is where we have relied on. It produces a single task. It is either for prediction or classification of images or detecting or fraud detection. We give inputs and it relies heavily on what human gives as an input, and it makes sure that there is the single task that is this AI has been given, does it properly with accuracy. But whereas coming to the latest form of AI, that is your agentic AI, what it does is it not only just does the single task, it plans, it is goal oriented, and make sure that there are some further steps that have been taken as part of the outcome that the traditional AI gives in. So this basically helps uh, reduce the false positives and see how this particular AI is being used. So what happens is both types of AI that has been mentioned here are useful. Just because there's a new kind of AI that has been come across, the traditional AI cannot be ignored. We need to combine the traditional AI, Gen AI, and agentic AI for better accuracy, better insights. And while agentic AI adds adaptability and autonomy, together they can form a powerful loop, predict and decide and act on by creating systems that not only are intelligent but are truly useful for us. So let's come back to the problem statements that we mentioned earlier and how adding AI to the solutions can help you better your tools, products, and your workload can be decreased. So coming to the first part, that is your cloud security, we mentioned how there are native tools and there are also other open source tools and that are available on market. They help you monitor your cloud misconfigurations continuously. They help you produce issues on daily basis, tell you what are all the issues that are there in your cloud infrastructure. But how you fix them is a big challenge right now. Automating this part can break your cloud infrastructure that has been hosting your production code. That is not a viable option. But how you find these remediations is something that can be helped and can be used. AI can be used there. So usually what we do is when we find a particular problem in cloud, we try to search their official documentations that have been released by AWS, Azure, or GCP. Then we search other websites to see how people are remediating, and then we try to solve this issue. So instead of all this multi-step approach that we are taking for, say, a simple remediation, we can use generative AI to give one single right prompt here. This can help you to figure out, it does the searching for you and it gives you the right kind of remediations and based on your infrastructure. And then this basically will reduce your manual efforts by at least 80%. The average time taken to remediate will significantly reduce. And then it has proven to give out more accurate results. And sometimes the websites are not up to date, they're outdated. So making sure that you use generative AI can help you with cloud security in fixing these issues. So let's go to the next case study that we have mentioned about secret scanning and validation, where open source tools such as Git leaks, Trufflehog have been uh, key tools in your company to give you issues or possible secrets that have been present in your repositories. All they do is reject pattern match. They will let you know if a particular key is a possible um, secret or not, but they don't really check if it is a valid key. They don't actually check if it is a false positive, and sometimes there could be some false negatives as well that they're not able to recognize. So validating the secrets, checking if they're actually you active or not would be a more useful thing to know for you as a company. This will reduce the number of keys that you need to actually fix or remove from your source code. Taking the example that we mentioned earlier about the permissions, a particular key might just have admin permissions versus another key might just have read-only permissions. So knowing what kind of permissions a particular secret key has, it helps you to prioritize which of these keys must be removed first or uh, solved first. So this is where we use agentic AI. It helps you to understand um, the validation part. It helps you with the permissions and what kind of permissions they have. And this will help you to fix these issues in a better way. Coming to the next type of case study, that is your software supply chain. As we all know, there are CDX Gen. It just lists out the number of packages that are there in your repository, generates the bomb, but it doesn't really tell you if the vulnerability is actually affecting your system. It might, the particular package version that your system or your code be using is might have like thousands of CVs recorded, but you might not be using that particular module or function to help you know that if this will actually affect you or not. So there have been research papers that have been published that will let you know that they have done a detailed study on some open source tools such as GitHub's Dependabot, Sift, Privy, CDXGen, and they have recorded the number of false positives and false negatives these tools have given out. You can see that GitHub has about 2,700 odd false positives that it has recorded, and it is not a good number that you want to have. This is that alert fatigue that Suman mentioned earlier. This actually is a major issue that a lot of companies have. Having so many issues does not mean that it is actually affecting you. So leveraging agentic AI to get contextual analysis of your BOM to see if this particular CV affects you is something that we can use agentic AI here. And also another useful case in with regarding to SBOM is to know the uh, what would be the most secure version against which is the reduced risk version of your BOM. So there can be the latest version of a package that would be the most secure version. It would have all the patch fixes of the previously recorded CVs, which can be a big jump, a big leap for a lot of developers and DevOps maintainers to have in their code. This can break their code, and this can cause a lot of issues and a lot of time for them to actually roll out a feature versus a reduced risk version. So what is a reduced risk version? Say your particular package version is around 5 and the latest is around 20, which is a huge leap to take in. So if you can figure out a version that is in between, say around version 10, that does not really has a lot of transitive dependency updates and then lot of code that can break. This particular version 10 would be the apt version that developers need to patch to instead of patching to version 20. So figuring out this most reduced risk version is something where we can use agentic AI for. To talk more specifically on how software supply chain can help, Certain has come up with a requirement to have these 21 fields mandatory in their BOM file and to maintain this BOM. So you can see that there are a lot of things that can your open source CDX can automatically give that as such as your component name, component version, the release date, the vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities is something that you would have to go again and check in your NVD database or other vulnerability database that are open source. But there are certain components, certain has mentioned, like your checksum hashes, executable property, tax status. These are some of the fields that are not readily available on the market. These are the fields that you would require you to do again some manual steps. You would like to go search your in Google, see if this particular issue or this particular field is available by the vendor maintaining this particular package. So instead of spending your time searching this, you could use Gen AI and Agent AI to help you figure out these, fill out these gaps given in certain. So, what do we want to do? What are the things that how are we going to address these problems and how do we want to solve this issue that has been that is something that we have to think about. While automation continuous scanning is the fundamental thing that we at least want to have in such tools that we would like to have as a company and our product to have to run on, the using of AI, leveraging of AI to give out right prompts, give proper contextual analysis, and using different types of AI, that is traditional gen and agentic AI, to help get a better understanding of the issue and reducing false positives by at least 85% is something that we have to work on. Is something that we can work on, and also not just give out automation tools, but we also require proper visualizations and workflow integrations and how it can properly seamlessly work with your existing DevOps pipeline.
Thank you, Maithri. So again, we did not want this to be a talk or a seminar where we are actively talking about our own solutions or make it more like a marketing or a sales pitch. But again, these are some of the problem statements that it's not only us. So if you're looking at the general public, if you're looking at the broader audience worldwide, and also looking at how some of these conferences are looking for solutions or submissions where they are tackling these real world problems and problem statements, we see that this is where a lot of companies are struggling, where you not only want some amount of automation, but you still want to be able to solve these fundamental pain points in a much more efficient way, have the right kind of prioritization information, and at the same time, reduce the risk really quickly. So that's where we think AI can really help. And it's a combination of traditional gen and agentic AI that we are actively exploring. So if any of you are working on similar problems or if you're actually facing these kinds of negative experience with the tools that you're using, whether it's for cloud security, whether it's for code level security, and so on, we'd definitely be happy to chat. So I think there are a bunch of questions already in the Q&A box, so we'll take them one by one. So Nazia, anything else before we start taking the questions?
No, Sumanth, you can go ahead and take up the questions.
Got it. Okay, so the first question is, do you think AI will ever fully automate vulnerability triage, or human expertise always stays essential? So in our experience, we see that AI is definitely getting better. So it is getting much more advanced in terms of adding weightage, calculating severity, providing meaningful triage information. But we are also seeing that there are a lot of errors, there is a lot of hallucination that happens, and this is disrupting the flow. The whole concept of vulnerability triage is that it's a very delicate line. So if you start throwing a lot of wrong information to your engineers, they're going to revolt, they're going to push back. And then it's not only going to take even more time eventually, there is a lot of trust that goes away. The short answer to that is yes, but not yet. So AI is definitely automating vulnerability triage, but for the foreseeable future, we see this among our own large enterprise Fortune 100 customers, that human expertise is still very necessary at this point. The next question is, what's the one outdated mindset about vulnerability scoring that AI is helping us unlearn? I think Maithri touched upon this when she was talking about false positives. We also talked about how pure play CVSS is good, but definitely not enough. And I think most of you knew this already. CVSS is a fantastic framework. It is very essential, but it does not give sufficient information on the actual risk. It doesn't give information about exploitability. So if you're still relying only on CVSS and traditional vulnerability scoring, you're going to have a lot of false positives on your hand. So you will need something a lot more contextual, something much more real world, and what are the risks, instead of just relying on absolute severity of a vulnerability. And this is also something that many of the standards are corroborating. We work with healthcare and medical devices. So the US FDA has a very strong cybersecurity team. If any of you are familiar with the 510K cybersecurity, you would have noticed that they moved away from severity to exploitability based analysis and expectations for their customers. So yes, so scoring is good, but you also need other contextual information. The next question is, what's the one piece of advice that you would give to teams just starting their AI journey in security? So there are two ways to answer this. One is whether it's AI in security or security in AI. So it depends on what you're talking about. So security for AI or security in AI. So if you're developing AI systems and you're worried about how to secure it, there's a lot of chatter happening. I believe there's also an OWASP standard now. There are ISO standards talking about how to secure your AI systems. There is also cutting edge research, again, without going too much into the marketing point. So there's also cutting edge research about what are the guardrails you should use for AI systems, let's say in cloud. If you're using SageMaker, Bedrock, Kendra, Neptune, Vertex, etc. So there are, including us, so we actively work on some of these kinds of guardrails. But if you're talking about using AI for securing your non-AI applications, I think that's also very interesting. So many of the standard tools, including Burp Suite, which is a pen tester's favorite tool, is increasingly pushing AI-based updates to Burp. We think that's really good. But I would also say that this is still early days. So while we work on a lot of pen testing projects, we're not seeing things that are extremely useful, something that we would overly rely on. We are still relying on some of the traditional tools, but slowly adopting AI. The next question is, do you think AI helps teams move from reactive patching to proactive defense, and how? we don't see people still doing this yet. So there are certain capabilities. I think some of these GitLab, GitHub tools have the capability where you press a button and then it automatically patches. But if you talk to developers, they are going to get really nervous about such kinds of solutions, because very often when you're talking about SBOM, third-party software supply chain, very often things break than actually work. So you're talking about API dependencies, backwards compatibility. That's the whole reason why we were mentioning about reduced risk version versus the most secure version. So again, this AI is getting a lot more information about the risk and vulnerabilities and exploitability. So I think it's more of taking the horse to the water. But if someone were selling me a tool that does automatic patching, I would really be nervous about that today. Next question is, how do you see the role of predictive analytics evolving in preventing real-world exploits? This is an interesting topic, and it's a pretty broad topic, I would say. So predictive analytics to understand what could be exploited. Real-world exploits happen in a very different way. So real-world exploits often also include a human element to it. So who knows about the vulnerability? Who's working on the exploits? Is it a nation state versus a script kiddie? So predictive analytics really has to closely mirror the shift left aspects of it as well. So have I done pen testing? Have I done the adequate amount of threat modeling? Do I know what the risks are? Do I know that my product is secure, but then there are certain areas where there could be vulnerabilities? That could actually help the predictive analytics. So doing some sort of predictive analytics is definitely a good exercise that can also help you be prepared when you see real world exploits, and eventually hopefully stop real world exploits. How can you contextualize the use of Black Duck and Coverity versus your solution? I think I would refrain from answering that. You know where to find us. So if you are really interested in getting a detailed comparison between Black Duck, Coverity, and our solution, please feel free to reach out. I don't want to talk about too much sales stuff here. How AI can build a risk evaluation. I think, if I remember correctly, Google was working on a solution where they talked about something called SecPalm. So SecPalm had this capability to use AI to actually develop certain capabilities for doing more of the shift left security activities. So I think the question from Noel is already, the things are already in motion. So we are also seeing a lot of startups talking about automated or AI-based threat modeling, risk valuation. I don't know if you're talking about the same thing, but risk assessment, shift left, threat modeling using AI, this is something that's already happening. Top practical references to DevSecOps to determine maturity of one's practices. So so I would say this is something where understanding your current security posture, where your cloud stands, where your code level maturity stands, you definitely need tools. So in fact, we mentioned many of the third-party tools in our own presentation. We have no vested interest in any of them. We are not going to get any money if you use any of them. But they are good tools. We definitely strongly recommend that you use tooling to get a understanding of how mature you are when it comes to DevSecOps. The real challenge happens after that, because we know that companies, big and small, spend a ton of money on tools, but we see that not all of them, in fact, a big chunk of them don't really realize the value of those tools. So if you were to determine the maturity of your own environment from a DevOps point of view, I would strongly suggest that you use the tools, whichever ones you like, and then do postmortem analysis and keep refining that. Is there any way of AI-driven way to approach container security? I actually don't know. So I don't think we have actually dug into that so much. Maithri, any thoughts on that?
So as of today, container security is divided into two things. One is the runtime security that the containers require us to install agent in each of these containers, and the other is static security of the images. So image scanning is something that you can use AI for. This will help you to figure out misconfigurations before it goes into deployment. Whereas your runtime security that requires agent is something we still need to figure out how an AI agent can be used as a traditional agent inside the container to scan logs.
Yeah. So I think there are certain solutions that exist for solving these problems. Specifically, container security, we have not actually seen a lot. Container security and workload protection, these are some of the areas where there are definitely challenges. We do see demand for that. So maybe there's new innovation going on there. Rohit, thanks for your feedback. So thank you for letting us know that it was clear and useful. There's a question from Sohan. What AI tools recommended for application on hyperscalers, Azure, GCP, OCI, AWS? There are solutions. Again, we talked about security problems in cloud. We talked about how they are relevant to Azure, AWS, and GCP. If this is an area where you're actively having problems or concerns, feel free to reach out. So we have our website here as well. So we'd be happy to talk more about that.
Thank you so much, Sumanth and Maithri, for such an insightful session. And thanks for your time to join us. And thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Hope everyone in the audience are walking away with some knowledge shared today. To stay connected with us and explore more resources, please visit our website, cyberminder.com. Also, don't forget to follow Cyberminder on LinkedIn for daily insights, updates, and knowledge sharing content.